Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Graduate Meteorology Program information session. For those joining us for the first time, welcome, and for anyone who's joining us for another webinar, welcome back. Before we begin proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered on today, and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of all lands that we are gathered on in all states and territories across Australia. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and contribution they make to this country. Today, we're going to give you an overview of the Graduate Meteorology Program. This will include learning about the outcomes of the course, the career outcomes for graduates, and how to apply. You'll also hear from our meteorologists about what they do and where meteorology has taken them, which is far and wide. My name is Jordan, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm joined by Alex, who you'll be able to see. She'll be producing today's webinar. Together, we'll make the webinar as interactive as possible, but before we start, may I ask for your attention as we cover off some housekeeping items. So with the current situation as it is in Australia, this webinar will be conducted from our respective homes and office spaces across the country. Please bear this in mind as we may encounter some technical issues during the broadcast. Our broadcast today will run for 60 minutes with plenty of time allocated for questions. There's already been some answered already. And this webinar is also being recorded and the video will be shared with you via email. For first-time webinar attendees, please see some helpful tips on your screen. Most importantly, please note the chat icon where you can send through any questions or feedback for the presenters during this session, and we're going to answer as many as possible during the allocated breaks. It's the speech bubble button labeled chat on the top of your screen. The icon will be underlined when it's on. If you want to test out the chat box now, feel free to tell us your name and where you're dialing in from. Thank you to everyone who's sent in questions during the registration process as well. We've used them to help shape the content you'll see today, and we're going to get through as many of those questions as we can as well. Finally, I'm delighted to introduce you to our presenters. From the Bureau, we have Dr. Mick Pope, Grace Legg, Taryn Darrow, and Rodney Bates. Here's a quick intro on all of them. Dr. Mick Pope has been with the Bureau for over 20 years, most of which has been spent in training. Mick has been a forecaster for New South Wales and the Northern Territory and also has a PhD from Monash University in tropical climate. Grace Legg joined the meteorology course in 2013 and worked as a meteorologist in Darwin's regional office. Later, she moved back to Melbourne as a senior forecaster in the Extreme Weather Desk and has since joined the national production team as an operations leader. Taryn Darrow is a meteorologist within the Bureau's National Security and Space Program and provides a variety of products and forecasts to support domestic and international defence operations. And Rodney Bates is our Indigenous Employment Senior Advisor within the Bureau's Organisational Development Program and is responsible for developing opportunities to engage Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to work with the Bureau, as well as programs to help support and develop current Indigenous employees. We also have Alex, Andrea, Daniela, and Noah who will be answering questions in the background. So you've got the best of the best looking after today's webinar. We have a packed hour for you today. It's going to include an overview of the Graduate Meteorology Program from course leader Mick Pope. We're then going to have some questions, talk to a meteorologist, Grace Legg, about her experience as a meteorologist, and also another experience from Taryn, and then talk about the affirmative measures and diversity with Rodney, and then more questions from you. So as you can see, plenty of time for your questions. Let's not keep you waiting any longer and get straight to Mick. He'll start us off with an overview of the course. Don't forget you can get your questions answered today, like I've been saying, so send them in as soon as you think of them. All yours, Mick. Mick, I have to tell you the line from 2021 onwards, you're on mute.
Yes, I know. I'm so sorry. Let me start that again. Good morning and welcome to everyone. I'm Dr. Mick Pope. I'm in Naarm or Melbourne on unceded Wurundjeri land, and I'd like to welcome you to this seminar. As Jordan mentioned, I manage the graduate program here at the Bureau of Meteorology, and so I'd like to give you an overview of that, a little bit about myself. I have been with the Bureau 25 years, and when I joined the organisation, we were still along the lines of state-based regional forecasting centres. In the 3 years I was in Sydney, I spent time issuing public weather and aviation forecasts, some time in the severe weather section, and a little bit of time on a RAF base in Williamtown, north of Sydney. One of the things that my time in operations impressed upon me is the things that we hold simultaneously together, and that is a fascination and a wonder for the awesome nature of the weather and the impacts that it has on the ground. So this image here is from a night shift that I did on April 14, the famous April 14 Sydney hailstorm, which initially moved out to sea and then came back in, tracked along the coast and produced the largest insurance payout for a weather-related event. What you can see in the pink shades is the evidence of very large hailstones hitting the ground. And we can study this radar reflectivity image and be fascinated by it and understand the dynamics that cause that thunderstorm to form and to propagate for over 3 hours. But the reality on the right-hand side of the figure is cricket ball size hail, which, as noted, produced a large insurance payout. It damaged roofs and cars and did all sorts of damage. So what it hits home to me is that the role that you're applying for or considering applying for is a fascinating one. The physics of the atmosphere is an amazing thing to study and to understand, but we provide a real service for real people living real lives and having real jobs and running a real economy, and the impacts are very, very real on that. So the service that you'll be providing if you join us is an incredibly useful one for Australian society as a whole.
Mick, you've gone on mute again.
Sorry, with 3 screens, I'm having a heck of a time managing them. Let me start
You're
that
doing
again.
great.
I'm doing fantastic, yeah. So our vision is to be an organisation of global standing, which indeed what we are, and we want to maintain that status. That's highly valued by the community, and I think everybody's impacted by the weather, whether it's checking it up via your app or you still watch the news or read a newspaper. Everybody relies upon our information and values what it is that we do. We believe and want to continue to provide a pivotal role enabling a safe, prosperous, secure and healthy Australia, because the weather impacts all of these things. To achieve our mission, we provide trusted, reliable and responsive weather, water, climate and ocean services for Australia all day, every day. That means 24/7 coverage by some of our operational METs. And the particular roles that you're applying for are here on the weather. We do this by focusing on impact and value, so finding the places where we can issue products and warnings that have the highest impact and enable people to make decisions for their everyday lives, running of businesses, etc. Operational excellence means that we work to the highest possible standard and we're always trying to refine our techniques and our methods and improve our forecasts. Insight and innovation not only means that we have a small but dedicated research section that's always trying to improve model output and introduce new products, but that you yourselves, if you join the organisation, will be asked to think about how it is we can improve what we do and bring your skills and your abilities and your experience, providing your insight and enable us to innovate. Finally, the Bureau Way means that we are an employer of choice because we have an outstanding culture that is diverse and welcoming, and everybody who comes to work wants to do so and knows that they're valued for who they are and what they contribute. The end of all of this is to try and contribute to a future with 0 lives lost due to natural hazards by providing the best possible weather information and information people can act on to add $2 billion of added social and economic value to the Australian community. I'm still not on mute. Great. So your career journey then. So if you join the Bureau, I'll be one of the first people you see. I'll be your manager here at Broadmeadows at the BMTC, the Bureau of Meteorology Training Centre, where you'll do a 10-month full-time and paid course. So your job will be to study and learn and absorb as much as you can before we send you out into the role that both Grace and Taryn will describe to you a bit later on. You'll start with a salary you can see there of $57,706 per annum plus 15.4% superannuation. And when you join the forecasting ranks, that goes up and up as you assume more senior roles. The BMTC is Australia's only education provider that offers the qualification you need to be an operational meteorologist. So it's recognised by the World Met Organisation. The WMO is the standard for providing aviation services and other forecasting roles, and it's also nationally and internationally recognised as a graduate diploma in meteorology. While you're on course, you'll have a buddy from a previous year's course, last year's course, or rather it's this year's course that's currently happening now. And then when you move into operations, you'll have a buddy in your work section, but also a senior leader will mentor you for the first 6 months of your career. So lots of people looking after you and helping you develop as an individual and settle into the organisation. Let me tell you a little bit about the graduate diploma. Over the 10 months, you acquire a lot of skill and knowledge that will help you throughout your career. The images there show you a few things that we develop. So for example, the first figure outlines the kind of conceptual models and which are supported by physics and maths about the broad scale circulation from climate change to the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index to the way the seasons vary, down to the synoptic scale, which is at the scale of the high and low pressure systems that you'll see on weather charts every day, and down to the meso and local scale, where people really care about, are they going to get a frost in their area like I had this morning cleaning off my car, or whether there'll be a thunderstorm at a particular airport and how that will affect operations. As I say, we pour a lot of time into helping you develop conceptual models to understand how the weather works, and that's applied to interpreting what numerical models tell you. So we have state-of-the-art large supercomputers in which we run our high-tech models, and so you'll have access to a whole variety of those from Australia and overseas to be able to develop a picture of how the world is evolving over time. But also you need to know what's happening in real time, and so we teach you how to interpret satellite imagery and radar imagery and the various observations that come in, so you can track how your forecast is going along through time. But of course, the world's best forecast is useless unless you can communicate it. So we spend a lot of time developing you in terms of your communication skills that you'll continue to refine and develop as we go on. And you'll see shortly 2 METs that I prepared earlier in Grace and Taryn, and see how well they communicate and understand what it is they do. So the stages of your career, firstly, stage 1 is with me out here at Broadmeadows between February and November, doing the graduate diploma full time. Stage 2 is what we call the job readiness training or dualling at Melbourne and Brisbane, which are our main hubs, and the Australian Defence Force sites. And Taryn will tell you a little bit about that shortly. As noted, you'll have a buddy through that process and a senior leader mentoring you. And then once you've dualed, once you're ready to go solo, you'll still be under close supervision. It's not a sink or swim process, but you're very well supported in everything you do and expected to rotate through other parts of the business. What are our areas of operations? Well, there's 4 main areas for an operational meteorologist. There's community services responsible for forecasts and some warnings, preparing things like the numerical model grids to provide guidance for these forecasts and for other groups. So national production would be your first stop there, most likely. The aviation industry, where you'll be working 24/7 to support aviation ops at places like Melbourne or Sydney Airport, or the regional airports, as well as high-level aviation weather for the international flights. National security, which Taryn will tell you about, is how we support the various defence forces. And energy and resources is where you work closely alongside the mining industry and both traditional and renewable energy sectors to provide a continuous supply of power for Australian homes and businesses. So a lot of very important sectors that we provide services to, and in those particular roles you'll gain a really deep insight into what the needs are. So what are the selection criteria? What are we going to be looking at when you write your application? Well, do you have, and can you demonstrate these things from both your study and your work and your sports and your hobbies and the various aspects of your life? Do you have a customer focus? Can you build trust? Can you engage and connect with people? Can you understand what their needs are? And in doing that in the Bureau's environment, uphold our service charter. Are you able to collaborate with people? Are you a trusted partner? Can you build productive relationships with others? Have you worked or can you work in a service-oriented team and have a growth mindset, which means you contribute from your skills and your abilities and your experience to ever improve the service that we provide? Are you good at making decisions? Can you problem solve and think critically and identify risks? Are you able to hear the customer's voice and therefore craft your decision making in that context? And finally, the Bureau way. Do you share our purpose that I outlined earlier? Will you uphold our values and behaviours as captured in the APS values and code of conduct? Selection criteria, well, there are some mandatory qualifications, which is a degree with maths and physics. Being part of the Australian Public Service, you'll need to be an Australian citizen or hold PR and be on the pathway, or be a New Zealand citizen, as you can see there. The timeline for everything, well, the applications close at 11:30 on the 27th of July, and typically we see a rush in the last week. Please don't leave it to the last minute, just in case there are tech issues. In July and August, I will be vetting the academic transcript and we'll be looking at your 1,000-word pitch, which tells us why it is you think you're a good fit for the Bureau and why you'd like to work with us. There will be some pre-recorded video interviews and some online psychometric testing. And then there will be some online interviews because of the whole COVID thing, of course, and a workplace assessment that you'll fill in online. Then in September and October, we'll do some pre-employment checks. We'll speak to your referees, and then you'll be made an offer. The course will begin in the end of January, start of February out here at Broadmeadows, and so you'll need to relocate before that time so you're ready to go. And you are fully supported through that process of relocation with assistance to move. Where do you apply? Well, on the Bureau's website, and there's a link there. You can find our careers page /GradMet, and then a link to the BOM Careers site where you can lodge your application. And there's more information about the role and so on that site. I've already talked about the citizenship status. You'll need some contact details that are up to date, a history of your employment and your education. So I need your undergraduate academic transcript. There are diversity questions that are optional, a resume and a CV, which you'll upload, the statement as noted of 1,000 words addressing the selection criteria, and the name of 2 professional referees. And you need to check with them that they're happy to do that and make sure that the contact details are up to date and they're contactable. And if you need assistance during your application, there's Recruitability available. A couple of quick tips: thoroughly read the position description and the selection criteria and shape your answer according to that. Use a contact email that's accessible at all times, even when you're away, and always check your spam folder. And as I said earlier, don't leave it to the last minute. Do get an application in. Hopefully today answers all your outstanding questions and you can finish up that application. And lastly, remember, we want to know about you. Any job application process is an opportunity to sell yourself, your skills and abilities. So don't be shy. Now, any questions?
Yes, thank you for starting us off today, Mick. We have tons of questions coming through, but before we will talk to the graduates of the program very soon, but now it's time to get those questions answered. So again, if you have anything, put it in the chat and we will start answering. We've got the full team on deck as well, so they can answer any questions that you have. So Mick Dillon has sent a question in saying, do I need university level physics? I'm halfway through my science degree, majoring in mathematics, and also have an aviation degree.
Well, I mean, mathematics is the language in which meteorology is expressed, so having strong mathematical tools and abilities will help support you through the course. But we are studying the physics of the atmosphere. So if you had a background where you understood some basic optics and thermodynamics and so on, then that's what you need. But if you've done that in your math subjects, if they've been very applied, then providing evidence for that, we'll be able to assess that properly. The standard candidate typically has first and second year maths and physics, but we're looking at variations on that theme. So physics is important. It demonstrates that you can reason physically and it will give you the background that you need to do the other subjects. So yeah, make a claim. Let me know what's in your transcript and what it is you've studied in detail, and I can make a proper assessment.
Excellent. You're getting peppered at the moment, Mick. A lot of questions coming through. AJ has said, can we do this program online and part-time?
No. Well, it's a qualified no. So we're in a COVID period, so part of the study is online. We are being flexible in terms of attendance, but our EA says that you need to be in work 3 days a week and you will need to be Melbourne based. And it is full-time because you're employed by the Bureau. It's part of your whole probationary process of being a public servant. So successfully complete the course, go into a region, that's old language, go into an office, do your dualing, finish your probation. So you're full-time employed. You don't need another job. You don't need to support yourself. That's your full-time task.
Excellent. Grace has asked, do you accept self-sponsored international students?
We don't at this point in time. We don't have fee help set up for the course, etc. We accept international students who are sponsored by a meteorological agency. And so we've taken students over the years from Fiji, Samoa, Kiribati, places like that, who come in on AusAid, or their organisation funds them to go back into their National Weather Service. So we don't currently take private students unless they're sponsored by somebody.
Sure thing. This question has come up so many times, Mick. We're just going to take the one. Mark has asked, is there an age limit to take up studies as a meteorologist?
There certainly isn't. A question you need to ask yourself as you get older is, because it's a shift work role, are you willing to do that? Do you want to do that? Are you physically up to that? But there is no age limit at all. As I said earlier, the Bureau, we're under the, follow the APS values and code of conduct. We're a diverse employer, so we're not going to say no to anybody on the basis of their age. What you'll find maybe is, if you haven't studied for a number of years, you'll need to do a bit of work to get back up to speed, but the age in itself is not a barrier at all.
Excellent. That's always good to hear, because we do get a lot of questions about that, saying, oh, can I do this? It doesn't matter.
Career
I'm older
changes.
now.
Yeah. This is not just about graduates straight out of university. We've had a number of people over this years who've decided they want a new career. And why not meteorology? It's a fantastic career.
Yeah, I guess it's all passion-based. Like, if you're passionate for it, then that's what we want.
Yeah.
Tamira has asked, if I get accepted and have to move, are living expenses covered by the Bureau, and do we get breaks from study?
Okay, really good questions. So you will be fully supported to move yourself and your possessions, and you get 3 weeks of supported accommodation while you're looking for a new place to live. And then if you're relocated again, say to Brisbane or somewhere else, you're supported through that process as well. There is 1 week off in the middle of the year. It's a pretty intense year. And then once you've finished the course, and that 1 week off tends to be flex time that you take, because you don't have much rec leave accrued. And then at the end of the course, you negotiate with your manager you're going to be moving under, whether or not you can take a week off or something like that. Typically, people moving to operations will take Christmas off because they're dualing. But yeah, there's a week off in the year, which you really will have earned.
Yeah. Benjamin has asked, do we have a choice where we get posted after finishing the training?
Absolutely, you do. So what happens is, before the course starts, the various areas of the business will tell me how many positions that they want. So at the start of the course, we know which sections want how many staff, but it's not until later in the year they say, well, aviation, it's this many in Melbourne, this many in Brisbane. So the process will be about September. You'll say, well, I'm interested in this location and this particular role, and here are my personal reasons and here are my professional reasons. And so there's a process of negotiation to decide where you end up.
Excellent, and keep an open mind. One of my first jobs was in Darwin, and I had no interest in going there at all. I hate the heat, and I loved every minute of it.
One of my teaching colleagues didn't even have Darwin as one of his 3 preferences. He got sent there. There aren't postings to Darwin, I should say, these days, for the most. And he spent 10 years there and loved it. So yeah, the 2 things to keep in mind are, firstly, keep an open mind, and secondly, if you get posted somewhere which might be suboptimal, or you might think this is really where I want to go, in a couple of years' time, it might be I want to shift somewhere else. And so you apply for a position and you can move states or move roles or whatever, and you will be supported in that.
Excellent. I'm actually going to throw to Grace to answer this question. We haven't heard from Grace yet. She'll be talking in just a minute, but and if this is going to get covered in your presentation, just ignore it. But Lachlan would like to know, what's the most rewarding part about working with the Bureau?
That is an awesome question. It depends the person, but I find it's the sort of knowledge of connection with the community, knowing that you are helping out, especially in the large events. I have been involved in some of the most recent sort of severe weather events, such as the rainfall through New South Wales and Queensland, and the bushfire seasons before that as well. So I'd say that's probably some of the most rewarding things, is knowing that you're helping the community through these really trying times. We can't stop the weather, and we can't help, with the fact that it is going to rain a lot or it's going to be a bad bushfire season, but we can help the community prepare, and the emergency services deal with these events when they do happen. So while they can be quite tragic that these events occur, there's that knowledge that you're helping the community in the sort of wider Australia.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Grace. And, while you've got the mic, we might move on. Our final Q&A session is coming up in just a little bit, and that's our big Q&A session. So a lot of your questions are going to get answered there, but we do want to get to our other presenters like Grace, who's going to be talking about a day in the life of a meteorologist.
Thanks for that, Jordan. And I'll get started. So I'll just talk a little bit about first my sort of career, and then a little bit also what is expected as a meteorologist, what I do on a day-to-day basis. So if we just move on to the next slide, I joined the meteorology course in 2013. I actually applied for the previous year and was unsuccessful. So for those that are asking about being unsuccessful, that can happen. Didn't quite get there the first time, but by the time I applied the second time, was successful. So if you don't get in, please ask for your feedback for any time you have had. Strengthen your application and apply for the next year, which is what I did. So I joined in 2013. There's a picture of me with my first ever chart I drew. Yes, we do still draw some of our charts by hand. It's a really important skill, actually. Not the best artist I am, but it was a pretty good attempt, at least for my first go, and I've gotten better since. And there's also just a picture of all my Met course notes that I actually still have, that I've kept for many years. So if we move on, so I did the course in 2013, and then I went to Darwin as well. So I was one of the ones posted to Darwin. When I joined the Met course, I said I'm not going to Darwin under any circumstance. And one of the trainers spent the entire year telling me how good it was. So I ended up putting it as my first choice and went there and loved every minute of it. While in Darwin, I started off forecasting the public weather. So that sort of, partly cloudy, chance of a thunderstorm sort of forecast, and things like the monsoon or rain. But over time, when I got more skills, I worked in the fire weather section for a little bit. So forecasting the fire weather components, moved into severe weather. So looking at thunderstorms and even tropical cyclones. I also did aviation forecasting, and we actually have a volcanic ash center as well, which are forecasts where the volcanic ash goes in eruptions, not just for Australia, because obviously we don't have any active volcanoes, but actually up north as well, looking through much of Southeast Asia, so that airplanes can make sure that they don't fly into any of the ash that is distributed into the atmosphere. Though that section's not actually in Darwin anymore, it's moved to Melbourne. So I stayed in Darwin until around about late 2017, where I applied and was successful at getting a role in what was called the Extreme Weather Desk back in Melbourne. So I moved back down to Melbourne as a meteorologist and then later a senior meteorologist. And that section was a little bit different to sort of the normal regional centres we had at the time. It was what was made as a surge support section. So the idea of it was you'd spend most of your days developing new products, trialing new ways of working, new models, looking at verifying, all of that sort of thing. But it did mean that because we had that flexibility, nothing we were creating was at that time operational. We were developing it for other teams. It meant that during large events, we could surge into them. So it means during tropical cyclones, I could work in Darwin or Queensland, and during bushfire seasons as well, help to support New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania, and South Australia. So was what my team did. And then the other main thing that we did was we took a lot of the load of national media crosses. So at the time, we were very broken into state and territory offices. So if someone wanted to talk about more than one state or territory, it would come to us as the national section. So that was what I did until we did a bit of a restructure, which is sort of still ongoing. So if we move to the next slide, I now work in what's called national production as an operations leader. So national production is part of what's called Community Services Group, which is basically the public weather side of the Bureau. And it's one of the three sort of sections in there. I will cover the other two later so I can get an idea of sort of what is in that part. But national production is really that public facing side. It is the national forecast for all public weather forecasts. So if you're looking on your app, that sort of forecast has been made most likely with national production, with discussion from the regional Mets as well. So we're actually split across Melbourne and Brisbane. It's one team though, so it's not a role in Melbourne or a role in Brisbane. It's just that you can do the role from either place. So it's one team split across both regions, and we are a 24/7 section. So we're the sort of 24/7 always on, so that there's someone always looking at the weather, while we have other teams that will surge and activate during events and have core hours as well. As mentioned, it's that routine public weather, and we work closely with the other parts of the community services group, which, as I've mentioned, we'll touch, but that's mainly around the communications, the decision support section, and the environmental prediction, severe weather sections as well. So we work closely with them, and overnight we sort of take over their responsibilities when they're not around. My role, though, as an operations leader, is to really look at assessing the impact and value across the country. So, what's the most important thing to us to look at that day? Where can we, with our time, give the most value to the Australian community, and to assess the risk as well of these events coming up? So, we make sure that there's enough staff going to be able to handle the big events when they come, that we're that those staff are supported, and that we're making sure we're prepared for any event. So, our job is actually to make sure that we're activating the centres when needed and deactivating them when they're not needed. So instead of having the same amount of staff every single day, we want it to flex so that we have more staff on busy days and less staff on those sort of quiet weather days. So that's sort of idea of this role anyway. If I move on to the next slide, just a bit about the sort of general setup and the sort of day-to-day. So that's actually a picture of my computer on one of my days. So we actually generally use about 4 screens just so we can make sure we're looking at everything at all times. So you'll often be looking at a lot of information at once. As mentioned, my section is one of the 24/7 sections. Besides us, the other major 24/7 section is the aviation section as well, which obviously needs to be on all the time because airports don't shut down. So the other sections though will be activated when required. So they're normally, some sort of business hours, 7 days a week, but as required, may be activated either 24/7 or extended those hours. Each section generally has someone as their sort of managers level. So we used to have what's called supervising meteorologists, now called team leads. For other sections, they're not on shift. They're generally just that sort of Monday to Friday. But for our section, we have the operations leaders, which are 24/7 as well. And then under us, there's always for each section, so generally senior meteorologists and then meteorologists under them. So when you come into a new section, once you've finished all your training, you'll always have someone around, it's a senior meteorologist around to help you out, which means you can continue to build your skills even once you have sort of gone solo, as we call it, but you can still build those skills and work with other meteorologists on shift. In terms of sort of how a day-to-day goes, we generally start with a handover of your shift. So either it'll be face-to-face or normally on Teams these days, where if you're in a 24/7, it'll be the night shift handing over the day shift and vice versa. But if you're in one of the other sections, you might get a handover from us, the national section, just to have an idea of what's happened overnight. And we also have written handovers. You use that information and then start to familiarize yourself with the situation, what's happening, what are the main risks, and what do we need to focus on today. And then you start going a bit more into the meteorology, the broad scale overview of what happens, the synoptics. Do we have a cold front coming through? Is there a low that's going to form on the east coast? That sort of big scale. And then you work into those finer details. Is there a sea breeze that's going to come in? Are those thunderstorms going to form on the ranges and that sort of thing? And to start to build your understanding of what's going to happen. And then we look at things like the verification. How are the models going? Are they ground truthing well? Are we going to look at one over the other? And you build all of that to make your forecast. So you use all that information, very robust sort of way of thinking, and using all that verification and understanding of the meteorology to really flesh out a forecast. On to the next slide. So generally in creating a forecast, we have multiple global models that we use and subsets within them. So there's globals, and then they'll have a finer scale, high res model version that we use as well. So we use all of those models. We have ensembles data as well. So a lot of those members, there look like 50 members in some of them. So we have a lot of information coming at us, and we use that information with our understanding of the meteorology and the physics behind the models, ground truthing them and understanding what they may and may do well, and taking all of that into account along with our understanding of customers' needs and risks. So, if there's a really high sort of end event that might happen, it might be a lower chance, only, a 10 to 20% chance, but still something we want to communicate to either that customer or the public that there is that risk of that really high end event happening, even if it's not the most likely scenario at that point. So that's sort of what we do to create our forecasts. If you go to the next slide, just have a look at actually how we create them. So in public weather, we actually use a gridded forecast. So it's actually all a grid that we make. So that's just an example of rainfall. So on the left, it's the probability of precipitation, which is just the probability of rainfall occurring at all. And on the right, it's at least a 10% chance of receiving at least that amount of rainfall. And I've just picked a random date. I can't remember what day that is, but you get the idea. So we do it on a national scale, and it's all gridded. So we do the same thing for temperatures, dew points, relative humidity, all of that, even the type of rainfall. We're going to get thunderstorms. All of that is gridded, and then it all comes together to make that text forecast as well. So it's all based on this, and we edit this using the various models and tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that everyone gets that really high quality forecast. So that's just the sort of public weather side and national production. If we move it to the other slide, as I mentioned, there are two other sort of major centres, major parts of the community services group, one of which is environmental prediction centres, which is sort of like our old severe weather sections. So we have a climate and water, which is hydrology and flooding. So they're obviously full of climatologists and hydrologists. But for meteorologists, the main two sections are the Marine and Antarctic Division. So their Marine Division actually does the warnings for something like abnormally high tides. And they also are actually part of the tsunami warning service. So we do actually do warnings for tsunamis as well for Australia. And as mentioned, Antarctic, which I'll also touch on later. And then the other big one is the severe weather service. So that's broken into three. So we have fire, heat wave, and air quality. So we do forecasts for the fire dangers around the country, as well as the heat wave risk. We do thunderstorm forecasting, heavy rainfall, and also tropical cyclones. So they're the centres that really hone their skills looking at one specific type of weather and that forecast and risk associated with that. And then next slide, there's also the decision support and communication branch as well. So creating a forecast is all well and good, but if no one understands it or no one knows about it, it doesn't really help anyone. So they are able to get it out through things like radio, TV interviews, social media, the website, but also just briefing to customers, including the emergency services. So we actually have people that are actually embedded in emergency services across the country. So they'll work with them, give them briefings day in, day out, and let them know the risks of what's coming up. So even if there's something that is, just that small risk, they can give them a heads up so they might be able to mitigate, even if it's not a big chance of happening. And that's happening pretty much every day around the country. And then just on to the next slide. So just some career highlights, things that I've managed to do, which were pretty exciting. So I presented at a World Meteorological Organization, WMO conference in the Solomon Islands in 2019. So that's an image of there with me with the other presenters, which was pretty exciting. I also virtually presented for Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines in the last couple of years, all on impact forecasting. So that was definitely a career highlight for me. And then also the other thing is I did tropical cyclone forecasting for both Queensland and the Northern Territory. And if you talk to most meteorologists, they all have a favorite weather type. And for me, it's tropical cyclones. And then the other big thing I managed to do was I was actually part of a documentary on Australian weather with National Geographic. And just on the last slide, as I mentioned, we do actually have an Antarctic division. I haven't gone to Antarctica, but one of my colleagues who was also on my MET course, Jackson, did get there. So that's some images of him down in Antarctica. So pretty exciting opportunity, which I'd love to do at some point. And as mentioned, he's managed to do. So I thought I'd just throw that in there. And so that's it for me. And I'll hand over to Taryn and they can talk about their experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace. So my name's Taryn Doe, and I'm currently on Ngunnawal land and working in Canberra as part of the Bureau's National Security and Space Program. So I'm just going to talk a bit about my time as GradMet during 2021 and what I've experienced in the 8 months or so since finishing Met course. First, bear with me though, because I want to dive back a few years. So growing up, I was always pretty curious about how things worked in the world. Why was the sky blue? How do airplanes fly? I was a typical science nerd in high school, and I was also one of the very few number of girls studying physics and high-level maths in Year 12. So the first photo there of me on the very left, I'm dissecting hearts and extracting strawberry DNA at a youth science forum. Leaving high school, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I ended up enrolling in a double degree of engineering and science. I'm 6 months into my degree. I had what I call an early life crisis. I heavily questioned where I was heading with my studies, and I also came out as transgender. So I took a break from uni to start my transition, and I also pondered whether or not a standalone physics degree would actually get me a job. I was fairly certain I didn't want to go into research. I wanted to be out in the world making a difference. Eventually, I decided I was happy enough studying just the physics for the problem-solving skills I was gaining. So I came back a year later. I dropped the engineering. I had a fresh start, a new cohort, and I also looked like a 12-year-old boy. But at least my voice had broken by that point. In my final year, I was lucky enough to work on a summer project calibrating a spectrometer. And this kind of solidified my resolve to do something practical after uni. But I was concerned about outing myself as trans when applying for jobs and work, as I've been having issues at my part-time job with homophobia and transphobia. I hoped, though, that the Bureau, filled with intelligent science enthusiasts, would be okay. And in my application, I actually cited examples of advocacy work that I've been part of at uni. Since then, I haven't had to think twice about being accepted, and I know that if I did have any issues, my managers would always have my back. We have a Storm Pride group, and the other diversity and inclusion work and events that happen throughout the year has been amazing to see, especially as it's always backed by the CEO and senior management. If you're looking for an awesome workplace with a vast array of expertise, diverse colleagues who are super passionate about the weather and willing to geek out over formulas and storms with you, then you're in the right place. Next slide, thanks, Mick. Now, I hadn't previously thought about meteorology as a career option, but it seems like the perfect way to apply my physics degree. So in Jan 21, as borders were cautiously opening, I moved down to Melbourne and began the Met course. And you can see there part of the Broadmeadows homerooms with one of the teachers. My cohort had a wide variety of ages, qualifications, work backgrounds, and learning together with them was a huge highlight of the year. At the end of the course, I got to put in preferences, and I nominated to go into a defence role with the Meteorological Intelligence Support Team, which is also appropriately known as MIST. So MIST is part of the Bureau's National Security and Space Program, which aims to enhance the capability of the Australian Defence Force through providing 24/7 weather intelligence at the Defence Force Headquarters Joint Operation Command in Canberra. National Security also provides Met services to 7 Air Force and Army bases located around Australia. So there is the opportunity to potentially work in other locations. After graduating last November, I got to spend a couple of weeks back home in Newcastle working at Williamtown RAF Base to learn more about the weather services and the roles there on base. So a typical day included a general area forecast, briefings to squadrons and pilots, weather observations, yes, you get to go outside and look at the clouds every half an hour, and interactions with many other stakeholders on base such as air traffic control and search and rescue units. The bases generally work, so the Mets at the bases generally work either early morning or evening shifts to cover the scheduled flying, and you get your weekends free too, so it's a pretty good deal. I was lucky enough to see the flyover display of the retiring FA-18 Classic Hornet, which is pictured there, and I also got into a flight simulator where I flew a Hawk under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And I promise I didn't take any virtual paint off either the bridge or the plane. Seeing or really hearing the new F-35 jets take off just outside the office window was also pretty neat. I then spent 3 to 4 months in Melbourne head office where Grace showed some pictures of learning how to forecast for aviation. So that considers many different potential hazards such as storms, icing, turbulence, dust, even smoke and volcanic ash. So this was a really exciting to start weather watching using satellite and radar and consolidate much of the theory that I'd learned during Met course. Further highlights in the last few months have been travelling up north for 2 weeks to gain tropical forecasting experience and meeting some of the really knowledgeable forecasters in Darwin. I got to tour the Army Dog Compound at Townsville and co-piloted a helicopter in another flight sim. I visited Catherine Gorge in a very, very humid Tyndall and chatted to a tech there while they replaced a laser component in our observation equipment. Most importantly, I was also shown how to clear the grass seeds out of the rain gauge and check for spiders and snakes, as these can cause anomalous readings to occur. I then spent a week gaining weather observation competencies at East Sale in Vic, with early mornings of heavy fog obscuring the runway just a short distance away. I've seen my colleagues at several bases supporting the efforts of the Australian Defence Force during the recent flooding in New South Wales and Queensland. And not too long ago, I was also lucky enough to be involved with supporting NASA's rocket launches from the Arnhem Space Centre in the Northern Territory. In terms of opportunities to be had during a career at the Bureau, not to forget Antarctica, which is also on my bucket list. I'm not sure what more you could ask for, and I've certainly enjoyed the experiences I've had in the short time since finishing Met Course this last year. So I'd now like to hand over to Rodney to talk a bit about affirmative actions in the Bureau.
Thanks, Taryn, and good morning, everybody. My name's Rodney. I work with the People Solutions team here at the Bureau of Meteorology, and I'm the Indigenous Employment Advisor for the Bureau. Firstly, I would like to say welcome and acknowledge that I'm on the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country in Boonwurrung country down here in the Kulin Nation in Melbourne, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that acknowledgement and respect to the owners of the lands on which you're all joining us from today. And any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the call, extend my acknowledgement and appreciation to you all. So just a quick bit of information from me. We are the part of the, as Taryn referred to in his their information, it was about diversity and inclusion. So that's part of our remit here in my role, and the main part of that role is to deal with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employees and improving outcomes for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employees here in the Bureau. One of those things that we can use in that is affirmative measures. And what affirmative measures is it's a measure designed to address the underrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within the Australian workforce, and particularly in the Australian Public Service, the APS. And we basically, what this allows us to do is we have one position set aside every year for affirmative measure, which is open to a person who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and it allows them to apply for the process. It's the same process. You'll still have the same conditions. You'll still have the same requirements of the role. However, it allows us to address those inconsistencies or provide equality for non-discrimination of employment in the workplace, and allows us to increase our representation in the APS of Indigenous people to reflect the Australian public and continue with that diversity within our organisation. So if you're applying under that process, we'll have the support of an Indigenous employment advisor, myself, if you join the Bureau, and a commitment from our Indigenous Employee Network, the IEN, who are quite active. And we do have just had a relaunch of our Reconciliation Action Plan, 2022 to 24 Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan. So it's an interesting time and an exciting time to join us in that space. A couple of things you'll need to know. You'll need to identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander in the diversity questions. Mick referred to those, I think, at the beginning of the application process. They are optional, but to opt in under this process, you'll need to obviously let us know that you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And as part of the process, you'll need to provide us some confirmation, but we can touch on that further down the track when that's required. Yeah, just a bit of information there. If you have any questions around the affirmative measure or anything to do with diversity at the Bureau, you can contact us on that email down the bottom of the slide there, diversity@bom.gov.au. So if you've got any questions around affirmative measure, please get in touch with us on that, and I'll do my best to help you out.
Thank you, Rodney. Appreciate that. And if you are feverishly trying to take down those email addresses, don't worry, the presentation materials will be sent out with the survey that we'd really appreciate you guys filling out, and a recording of the email in the next few days. So watch this space for those to come out. Well, I hope that gives you a lot of information on the Graduate Meteorology Program. I'd like to invite all our presenters back so we can get to more of your questions. This is your last and greatest opportunity to ask questions of all our panelists, and they are doing a power of work behind the scenes, answering your messages either by text or by talking to us. So we're going to get straight into one from Tony. This is for you, Taryn. What made you interested in a career in meteorology, and was there a subject at school that really cemented this interest?
Yeah, I suppose I was really interested in it. One, just for the variety of work and the variety of people that you get to work with. As I've seen so far, like in the short time that I've worked here, I've seen so much already. And in high school, yeah, I absolutely loved maths and I love physics. And I had a really inspiring physics teacher. And he was probably the main reason that made me go into physics at uni. So I absolutely loved that. And I knew I didn't really want to go into physics research, but yeah, meteorology kind of linked up really well with that.
Excellent. Thank you, Taryn. Mick, can I ask you to drag your themes off? It's a bit weird seeing yourself flipped like that, I'm sure.
Sorry,
everyone...
that's just because it's really odd seeing you on that side and then staring at my camera. I keep forgetting you can actually see. Yeah,
well, while I've got your attention, Mick, Ben has asked a question.
Sure.
So if you're applying whilst you're in your final semester of uni, is an incomplete academic transcript acceptable?
Absolutely. So we employ you on the basis that you'll pass the rest of your subjects. But yeah, absolutely. We get people apply all the time and they're honours year or, in third year and they've only got so many results. So we judge your academic performance on the basis of what you've done and make you an offer of employment on the condition that you pass your course. That's pretty standard.
Okay. And keeping with you, Mick, Evanston has asked, how important are grades or GPA in your application?
Yeah, sure thing. We're looking for a credit average in kind of the subjects that are relevant to what we're looking at. So if you had straight HDs in English literature or history, that shows that you've got skills in a particular area, and it's certainly important, but we're looking for a credit average or better in the maths, physics kind of space to show that, the first thing you can do is pass the course, but also demonstrates your ability to reason physically and so on.
Excellent. We'll move on to a question for Grace. And you'll see a lot of the guys are busy typing away at your questions as well. So keep sending them in if you do get them, because if I don't ask them, they'll still be able to answer them for you. Alicia has asked, how long is a posting on average?
Hopefully that's unmuted. It's taking a while.
Yeah,
My
you're good.
screen. Yep, excellent. Now postings vary. So when you're posted, that's your new permanent position. So from there, you need to then apply for and win a different position as they come up. Or there are ways that you can move if you need to move for personal reasons as well. We can look at doing transfers that way. So there is definitely ways to move, but it normally is you need to look for another role within the Bureau. There's plenty of them going when it comes to forecasting and sort of move that way. So your posting is permanent until a time that you sort of win a role somewhere else. But yeah, there's generally flexibility if you need to move for your personal family reasons, that sort of thing. We'll take that into account and often look at sort of often what will happen is if you needed to move to a section, we might say, okay, well, in the next year's grad course, we'll send one less person to that thing, swap you around, and you can go to this sort of section as well. So that's generally how we deal with those situations. But as I said, there's plenty of movement at the moment. There's been a lot recently. So there's been definitely the ability to move around depending on where you want to get within within sort of CSG and the aviation sections as well. So they're the main sort of meteorology section.
Okay, jumping back over to you, Mick, Grover has asked, I have just finished my maths degree, but I think I might like to take honours next year. If I were to receive an offer here, would there be a possibility to defer until completion of honours, or would I need to reapply the next year?
Yeah, unfortunately, you'll need to reapply. Every application is against a given cohort that applies, and yeah, we don't defer positions. So, I mean, you can always apply, be accepted, and then say, I'm going to do honours, and then reapply next year. At least you'll know if you've got through the process and made an offer that you've got the skills that we're after. But it's a competitive process against each year's cohort.
Okay, and staying with you, Mick, I just got a comment that we have some excellent names today. We had Evanston before, Grover, and now Lennon has asked, is there potential for a grad meteorologist to move across into climatology or research-based positions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. People certainly have done that in the past. There is, to my knowledge, not a clearly defined career path for either, but people, can make those kind of changes. It's worth stressing that the primary thing we're looking for is frontline meteorologists in this role, but you take charge of your own career narrative and pathway.
Excellent. I'm going to move to Taryn. Connie, I hope I've said that right. They've asked specifically for your opinion, Taryn. Is there much difference working as a meteorologist for Defence Force versus being a meteorologist in the Defence Force, such as a METOC Navy officer?
Yeah, no worries. I did put a response in the chat, but happy to answer it. So just to be clear, as a defence meteorologist with the Bureau, you are employed by the Bureau. So we work really closely with Defence and for Defence, but I still am an employee of the Bureau, whereas the METOC, the Navy Mets, are employed by Defence, and so they go through postings. I'm not too sure on the specifics of their role, but we do work quite closely with them.
Okay. I think this might be the last question that we'll have time for, but remember, we are still answering them in the chat, so you can hang around and those questions will be answered. I just wanted to get to one from Lachlan. This seems like a good question for you, Grace. What do standard shift days and times look like?
It highly depends which section you end up going to. So for national production, as I mentioned, we're 24/7. So our roles are generally 12-hour shifts, though not all of them. So we have at least 3 people on at all times. So 3 of our shifts are 24/7, but we actually have more people on during the day than the night as well. So there is a bit of a balancing there, but they're only 12-hour shifts, and the shift patterns depend on what you vote for. So it's amongst the staff to decide what sort of roster they want. My role, we voted on that sort of 2 days, 2 night, 4.5 days off structure, which is generally what we go with. But other sections have voted for, 2 days on, 2 days off, 2 nights, that sort of thing. And then, as mentioned, we're not the 24/7, so other sections might have it a little bit differently. For example, decision support roles, most of their shifts are around about, I want to say that 11-hour mark, starting, I think some of them start as early as 6 in the morning, some start a little bit later at 7 a.m. And they'll go for sort of 10, 11 hours, and they'll be 7 days a week. So I think it's like 4 on, 3 off, but probably not that exact number. So that's the sort of way. So it depends which section you're in to what the hours are. So as I mentioned, my section's 24/7, decision support 7 days a week, and generally those hours. Environmental prediction, for example, the thunderstorm team, they do split shifts. One starts at 7 a.m. and goes to about 4 or 5, and then the other one starts at midday and goes till 9 p.m. So they have that extra coverage during the evening, because obviously there's a fair amount of weather. So it just depends which section they are. And then there are things like the Marine and Antarctic is only routinely Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and then they get activated if needed on the weekends or overnight, depending on the weather that's occurring. So it really depends which section you're in, but you do have some input at least into the sort of this pattern that you work as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that, Grace. While everyone finishes up answering your questions in the chat, I just wanted to invite Mick to come back, and because there was a lot of information to take in there, and if you did miss the start, could you please summarize what we spoke about today and where to find more information?
Sure. So more information's on the website shown there, www.bom.gov.au/careers/gradmet. There you'll find the job criteria, information about the role, and so on. Today we've looked at what the role entails and the various sections that you can work in. So you've heard from Grace and Taryn talking about their recent experience, different roles you can enter. I've talked to you a little bit about how you apply and what's involved in terms of addressing selection criteria and our prerequisites for your majors in maths and physical sciences. Talked a bit about the sorts of attributes that you need and the various steps involved in the process. Don't hesitate if you've got any questions to contact the team at that email there, graduatemets@bom.gov.au. You can get some specific advice on the application process, and if there's any technical questions about your actual application, your academic transcript and how it's assessed, that'll get forwarded to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mick. If you'd like to get more information on your favorite platform, why not connect with us on social media, our excellent Bomb Weather app, or our blog, and also the Bomb Weather app has now added notifications. Very exciting time for us. You can also subscribe to receive updates direct to your inbox from the Bureau about everything the team have talked about today and information on upcoming webinars. Well, that brings us to the end of today's webinars. For any question we didn't get to, please email graduatemets@bomb.gov.au. A big thank you to Grace, Mick, Taryn, and Rodney for your time in developing the content and sharing your knowledge with us, and Alex, Andrea, Daniela, and Noah for monitoring the chat. You would have gotten a couple of responses from them, I'm sure. And to you, thank you for tuning in and joining us today. We do hope you've enjoyed the session, and we do hope you'll join us again next time. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please use the hashtag BombWebinar in your posts. So as I mentioned earlier, this session has been recorded and the video will be sent out to you for your on-demand viewing pleasure in the next couple of days, so watch this space. Finally, but most importantly, we do want your feedback. It's our aim to bring you the highest possible quality webinars, but we can't do that unless you share your experiences with us. An email will be sent to you with a short survey, and we'd be very grateful if you could complete that anonymously for us. Once again, thank you for your time and your excellent questions, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.